A government task force is recommending reforming the way Minnesota schools are financed. The Education Finance Working Group, which was formed in 2011, released 8 recommendations recently. Lacey Monteleone has more on what those recommendations entail and what local school officials have to say about the proposal.
The Minnesota Constitution requires the legislature to provide adequate funding for public schools, but in recent years, school officials say the state is falling behind.
The state decided that they would assume the responsibility to pay for all education. The problem is they didn't have the finances in place in the long-term financial plan to do that.
Hess says the result is that the schools see fewer state dollars and education is becoming a smaller part of the state budget.
The state is stepping back more and more, and they're relying more and more on local levies. The cost of schooling is going up each year through inflation.
The Education Finance Working Group is hoping their recommendations will help improve funding for public schools.
Part of the recommendations from the group were to create a more stable general education funding system and reduce the reliance that districts have on these voter-approved referendum levies.
Hess says operating levies used to be just for extra things like new buildings or new programs.
Now we're using operating levies for bread and butter kinds of things, the things that we have to have essentially to keep the doors open.
The Bemidji School District uses their levy to ensure smaller class sizes, all-day, everyday kindergarten classes, and transportation for students.
You don't, have all-day, everyday kindergarten, then you lose half of your kindergarten staff.
While the last levy to go before voters in the Bemidji School District did pass, task force officials say too much energy is wasted.
There is a tremendous amount of energy that school superintendents and school board members make in order just to explain to the public why they need to continue getting referendums or why they need to have an increased referendum when the state has not been keeping up on the state general education funding formula.
But with the new recommendations, the task force hopes the state will become more accountable. Lacey Monteleone, Lakeland News.
The report also calls for phasing in revenue increases and the Uniform General Education Levy in order to make the transition smoother. Officials from the task force say the next step will be to review the recommendations with Governor Dayton.
If you've enjoyed this segment of Lakeland News, please consider making a tax-deductible contribution to Lakeland Public Television.